Dave Talks Comics, Episode 84, All-Star Squadron 27 and 28. Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, a program on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk from my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comic books and cartoons, I will almost certainly spoil them in some way. On this episode, I will be talking about the magic-based story from All-Star Squadron numbers 27 and 28, which featured, for the most part, the Justice Society, including, especially, Dr. Fate and the Spectre. It's been quite a while since I talked about All-Star Squadron, which was one of my favorite comic books when I was in my around 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, in that period. The last time I talked about it was on episode 23, and the last time I really talked about a story from All-Star Squadron was episode 18 of Dave Talks Comics, which goes back to the spring of 2014, I think specifically April and June of 2014. When I was talking about the Ultra story or the Ultra Saga or the Ultra War, I can't remember exactly what the correct title or even if there was a definitive title given to that storyline, which ran from All-Star Squadron issues 21 through 26 in Annual 2, and I discussed that entire story on previous episodes of Dave Talks Comics, which that story also introduced Infinity Inc., and then I also talked about Infinity Inc. or the first 10 issues of Infinity Inc. Across 3 episodes of Dave Talks Comics, but the last time I talked about that was episode 25. This time around, I'm going to talk about a 2-part story which ran in All-Star Squadron issues 27 and 28. So this is the story immediately following the Ultra storyline, the Ultra Humanite storyline. And this one is much more magic-based. And the title of the first issue is A Spectre is Haunting the Multiverse. And it's written, of course, by Roy Thomas. The artist here is Richard Howell, and the inker is Larry Houston. Now, Richard Howell, I did a little bit of research. This wasn't his first work at DC, but it was almost. I think he had done a backup story and an issue of Green Lantern, and he'd done a little bit of work at Marvel prior to this. But his earliest work, I think, only dates back to the late 70s. I didn't fall in love with the artwork in this story. I think it works. I think it's serviceable. It isn't my favorite, but that may be because I'm used to Jerry Ordway, and I think Jerry Ordway is great, and I really liked his work. I even liked Rick Hoberg's work, which comes up a little later. I think he did a couple backups, and Mike Macklin's work on this series, Adrian Gonzalez, Rich Buckler. I thought they all did very good work, and Richard Howell's work is good. It's just, it didn't quite measure up, in my opinion. So this issue begins with a parting of the ways. It picks up at the end of the Ultra story, or it's kind of the epilogue of the Ultra story, which ended kind of abruptly at the end of All-Star Squadron Annual 2. You see a bunch of the All-Stars taking off. The final scene occurred at a hospital in, I believe, Metropolis. And so you see a lot of the All-Stars taking off. Green Lantern is flying a bunch of them home, I guess, to various places. You see Phantom Lady, the Guardian, Commander Steel, Johnny Quick, Liberty Bell, Batman, Tarantula, and Amazing Man, all in a bubble that is being controlled, that is being formed by Green Lantern's power ring. And then you also see Superman flying off. So they're all kind of saying their goodbyes and taking off. You also see the Flash taking off, Jay Garrick. The only ones who stick around are Firebrand and the Atom. And they are looking after Terry Curtis at this point, who will later, I assume Terry is short for Teresa in this case, because this is a girl. She is the daughter of Terrence Curtis, who was the villain the reluctant villain, known as Cyclotron, who played an important role in the Ultra storyline, but basically killed himself in an attempt to kill the Ultra Humanite at the end of the Ultra story, but the Ultra Humanite, of course, has surfaced again since then. I don't think Terrence Curtis, Cyclotron, has surfaced since then, so he was the only one who actually got killed. Now, the interesting thing, or the thing to note about this, is that Terry Curtis, his daughter, will grow up. She'll marry somebody named Rothstein, and she'll have a son named Albert, who will be one of the members of Infinity Inc. He was originally called Nuklon, and then he was later called Atom Smasher, and he may have had other superhero names, I'm not sure. But the Atom and Firebrand are sticking around to look after her. They take her down into the hospital. They're trying to get some help, and at this point the Atom collapses, and this is because he was fighting with Cyclotron, who some of his powers were nuclear-based or atomic in nature, and he absorbed a certain amount of radiation while fighting Cyclotron, and he collapses. Now, this is a bit of foreshadowing of what's going to happen later on. The Atom will later gain super strength. This is early 1942 at this point, at least when the story is supposed to take place. In the comic books that were coming out in 1948, the Atom started to display super strength. Prior to that, he was just a tough guy who wore a costume. Like a lot of not all, but a lot of the superheroes of that time. I'm thinking of characters like Wildcat or the Guardian, and actually there's a connection between the three of them now that I think about it. If you go back and listen to the very first episode of Dave Talks Comics, I talk about All-Star Squadron Annual Number 1, where the connection between the three of them is revealed. And I suppose Batman also, although some of these heroes who don't have superpowers do have gadgets like Batman, or Tarantula is another one. So eventually the Atom will get superpowers. He will also get a new costume which looks very similar to Cyclotron's. And that new costume first appears in Flash Comics number 98, which appeared in August of 48, although I'm not sure if that's the first time that he exhibited super strength. It's a little unclear to me. I tried to do some research. What I was able to find about the new costume was thanks to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, because I couldn't find anything anywhere else that pointed me to when he got the super strength, other than that it was in 1948 or when that he got the new costume. So he gets admitted to the hospital and is fighting this radiation. He's sick from this radiation, which eventually will give him super strength, of course. So then the scene shifts to the Justice Society. Now the Justice Society have basically missed most of the Ultra Humanite storyline. And at the time that, let's see, I'm looking at issue 27 now. We have Starman, we have Hawkman, we have Dr. Midnight, we have the Sandman, we have Johnny Thunder, and we have Wonder Woman. I believe that's it of the members who were in Washington, D.C. at this point. Of course, the hospital is up in Metropolis in New York, and I'm not sure if they're using New York and Metropolis interchangeably at this point. But the way that they find out about it is through Wonder Woman's magic sphere. Now, this is a device that allows Wonder Woman, it's something she got from Paradise Island, I guess was invented by the Amazons. And I tried to do some research on this, and I couldn't find a whole lot. It is something that did show up in the Golden Age, And it allows her to look both into the past and into the future. Although they call it a magic sphere, it's not really a sphere. It's a box which has a circular panel on it, or a circular screen on it, which has dates and places in these rings going around it. And I guess they play with the rings or something like that. They shift the rings to tune the sphere to where it's supposed to be looking. So the first time, it's used twice in this issue. The first time is to allow the Justice Society to see what's going on with the atom, and then the Justice Society decides to take off to leave Washington because they've been basically asked to hang around Washington and to, in case they are needed for something. They have been formed, they've been told they're now the Justice Battalion, I believe. So the ones who can fly. The other ones get a ride from Wonder Woman in her invisible airplane. It's not an invisible jet at this point. It's just a propeller plane. And along with her magic sphere, they go to visit the atom. Well, then they use her magic sphere for the second time to figure out what happened to Dr. Fate, because Dr. Fate just took off at one point during the Ultra saga, or the Ultra storyline. And so what they see is they now see what happens through the magic of the magic sphere. They're able to see what happened to Dr. Fate, and they see him looking for the Spectre. And he tracks down the Spectre using Jim Corrigan, who is the Spectre's alter ego's body, because it's underwater, but it's protected by, I guess, a spell that the Spectre cast. And so somehow, because Jim Corrigan's body, and it doesn't seem like his spirit is there, but the body still has some sort of a psychic connection with the Spectre. And Dr. Fate makes some comment about how he could have searched for decades looking for the Spectre and not been able to find him. But thanks to Jim Corrigan's psychic connection to the Spectre, he was able to locate him. And so he casts a spell, and then Jim Corrigan's body points or creates a portal, I guess using Dr. Fate's magic. And Dr. Fate travels through there. And what Dr. Fate finds is that the Spectre is guarding Kulak. Now, Kulak is a villain. He is blue-skinned. He has 3 eyes. And he only appeared once in the Golden Age, and he seemed to have been destroyed at the end of that battle, and he did fight the Spectre, and that was in All-Star Comics number 2, which would have been the issue before the first appearance of the Justice Society, because a number of those characters who became part of the Justice Society had appeared in All-Star Comics issues 1 and 2, but it wasn't until issue 3 that they actually formed a team and became known as the Justice Society. So this villain, Kulak, is actually sleeping, and the Spectre is guarding him, and apparently the Spectre has been hypnotized or is under Kulak's control somehow. Kulak is a high priest of Brztal, Brztal, and he uses magic powers, but his killer spell is the Whispering Death spell, and this does play a part in the next issue. So Dr. Fate confronts the Spectre because he's guarding this resting place of Kulak, and he warns Dr. Fate not to interfere. And when Dr. Fate goes inside to find out and sees that it's Kulak that's in there, that's in this, what is it? It's it's a small building. I'm not sure. It almost looks like a mausoleum, but it's not. Obviously, Kulak isn't dead, so I guess mausoleum wouldn't be the correct term. But the Spectre then engages Dr. Fate in a battle. Now, the neat thing about this, and this also, what I'm going to say now kind of describes, the way to describe some of these scenes, they're very reminiscent of what Steve Ditko did with Doctor Strange's comic book. You know, some of the mystic places that Doctor Strange would travel to when he would fight Baron Mordo? I think that's... Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah, I think it's Baron Mordo, and I'm forgetting the name of the bad guy who... maybe it'll come back to me, but the guy with the flaming head who Dr. Fate or Dr. Strange would battle. Anyway, these dimensions that he travels through, it's very reminiscent of some of the stuff there. It doesn't look exactly like it, but it definitely seems like it was influenced by that. Let's see, is there anything else that happened? So basically, Dr. Fate and the Spectre battle, and it ends with the Spectre hurling Dr. Fate through an infinity of dimensions, is the way and that's exactly how they describe, to the end of unrecorded time. And after that, Kulak wakes up. He decides he's going to travel to Earth, and basically that's where the issue ends. Let's see, I think I had a couple more notes on this issue, or maybe I've covered everything. So Kulak arrives on Earth via what I would describe as a dimensional rift. So you see kind of his hands ripping open the sky and traveling from the dimension that he was in to the dimension where Earth 2 is. So that's the end of the first issue. Now, the second issue I mentioned briefly in a previous episode, in episode 75, because this is the first 75-cent issue. This is the December 83 issue of All-Star Squadron. And December of 1983 was the month that the DC Comics went from 60 cents to 75 cents. Once again, this is written by written by Roy Thomas and drawn by Richard Howell. The inker in this case is Gerald Fortin. And the title of this issue is By Hatred Possessed. So this issue opens up with the JSA fighting Kulak because, well, honestly, it's not entirely clear why Kulak would go to the place where the JSA are because, it's not really clear why he would do that. But anyway, so the JSA engaged Kulak kind of unsuccessfully. Kulak uses his magic. He's almost a godlike being, I guess kind of like the Spectre is. And Kulak uses his magic to cast spells on people all over the earth, and everybody's seeing him. So maybe it's a bit wrong to suggest that he's going to just where the JSA are if everybody's able to, around the world is able to see him when he casts the spell. I mean, they show various people. They show General MacArthur in the Philippines. They show people in, let's see, where is this? In the suburbs of the... They show people in Singapore, people in Europe, in Germany, all sorts of people around the world seeing him. Now, it looks like Kulak is too much for the JSA to handle, the Justice Society, but then Sargon the Sorcerer shows up. Now, Sargon the Sorcerer is another Golden Age character. He first appeared in All-American Comics number 26. And he uses the Ruby of Life, which he has in this. He's a stage magician who actually has magic powers, and he had a fairly long run in both All-American Comics and then later in Sensation Comics, and he continued to appear basically until 1949, and at that point he kind of disappeared from comics until I think the late 60s, around 1969, something like that. So, unlike the Justice Society, Sargon the Sorcerer is actually able to do something to Kulak, and using the Ruby of Life, which is on his turban, he is able to, by touching it to the Ring of Life, which is on Kulak's hand, he is able to force Kulak back to his own dimension, back from, forces him to leave Earth, or Earth 2 in this case. Let's see. Then you get a kind of a recap of things that have happened before. Sargon the Sorcerer, it's not entirely clear how he knows all this, or maybe it's because he has the Ruby of Life, and the Ring of Life is the sister stone, I think he says, of the Ruby of Life. Maybe that's how he knows these things, but he tells these stories which were originally appeared in All American Comics number 26, which basically he gives you a very brief synopsis of his origin. Then you get a couple stories that appeared about the Spectre that appeared in All-Star Comics numbers 2 and 5. And then there's a slight recap of a scene from All-Star Squadron number 20. And that all those things run about, I think it's 3 pages. Or maybe it's just 2 pages. Yeah, I think it's just 2 pages for all of those recaps. To kind of give you an idea of, he's basically giving the update on who Kulak is, and what the Ring of Life is, and what the Spectre's history with the Ring of Life is, and what the Spectre's history with Kulak is. So this is their way of getting you caught up on this so that you don't actually have to have read those Golden Age issues in the case of the 3 of those issues. So at this point, Kulak has been banished back to his own dimension, but he's not completely impotent there, because then he uses his Whispering Death spell. And what this does is it drives everybody on Earth mad, except for, I think, basically Sargon the Sorcerer. But the JSA, it drives them mad, it drives the Spectre mad, and the Spectre, the Spectre shows up, although I don't think it's clear here exactly how the Spectre shows up, if it's Kulak who sends the Spectre, or if it's the Spectre who decides to show up. I tend to think that it's probably Kulak who sends him. So the JSA take on the Spectre at this point. So where in the beginning you got a battle between Kulak and the JSA, now you get a battle between the Spectre and the JSA, which is what you see on the cover of All-Star Squadron number 28. You see the, let's see, who you've got: Hawkman, Dr. Midnight, Sandman, Wonder Woman, Starman, and Johnny Thunder and his Thunderbolt attacking the Spectre. So Sargon the Sorcerer is kind of on the sidelines, and what he does is he finds Dr. Fate, who in issue 27 had been banished to an infinity of dimensions. And so while Kulak is using the Whispering Death spell to drive the JSA and the rest of the world insane, and then sends the Spectre to take them down, Sargon the Sorcerer locates Dr. Fates and sends him to battle Kulak in Kulak's dimension. Now Kulak defeats Dr. Fate and takes his helmet and tries to use it, but you got to remember, Kulak has 3 eyes, and it's his 3rd eye, the one in the center, which I believe is where his magic is. If it isn't generated there, that's where it emanates from. And when he puts on Dr. Fate's helmet, he's defeated because his magic can't penetrate the helmet. And at that point, he gets sent. Let's see, turning the pages. He gets sent through an infinity of dimensions now, worlds beyond worlds, it says. And everything's better. The Whispering Death spell is broken, but Dr. Fate's helmet is lost, which then Dr. Fate gets his other helmet, the half helmet. And this is kind of a way of explaining why Dr. Fate was sometimes shown with the half helmet and sometimes with the full helmet. I'm not sure. I think this is the first time that they've explained it this way. I'm not, because it's certainly not the first time that Dr. Fate has shown up since the Golden Age. There was a number of JSA, JLA crossovers in which Dr. Fate appeared, but I think in all of them he shows up with the full helmet. And so it was never explained why he sometimes had the half helmet, why he had the full helmet. And I mean, the story is basically the half helmet actually contains the spirit of Nabu, this ancient sorcerer who I don't think is actually human even, depending on which version of Dr. Fate's origin you read. But Nabu actually possesses Dr. Fate's body, Kent Nelson's body, when he puts on the full helmet, but the half helmet does not give him, does not possess, Nabu's spirit is not within that helmet. Now, Dr. Fate has some other trinkets that allow him to do some magic, but he's nowhere near as powerful when he's only wearing the half helmet. I'm not sure if they ever explain when Dr. Fate gets the full helmet back. It's possible that at some point before this it had been explained. I kind of doubt it, but I'm not sure. But it's definitely possible that since 1983 that it has been explained what happened to the helmet after this and how Dr. Fate recovered it. But I'm not certain on that. The only other things to notice in this storyline are there's a great double-page spread towards the end. This is after the story, which shows the Infinity Inc., who are about to debut in their own book. Now, it shows some members who were not in the book initially, or at least one. Yes, one member who's not in the book initially. And I think it may mention some others who were not in the book initially. Yes, the one who it does show, Lagaro, who I believe is supposed to be a protege of Wildcat because all of the members of Infinity Inc. were sons or daughters or proteges of members of the Justice Society originally. Well, not all of them. Of course, there's also Brainwave Jr., whose father was Brainwave Sr., who was a villain. But Lagaro was not in the first 10 issues of Infinity Inc. or in that crossover story between Infinity Inc. and All-Star Squadron, or that the All-Star Squadron story which included Infinity Inc. Wasn't really a crossover since there was no Infinity Inc. comic book at that time. But they do mention that Sandy the Golden Boy was also going to appear in Infinity Inc. Now, honestly, I've only read the first 10 issues of Infinity Inc., which is the Generation Saga, and I talked about them on previous episodes of Dave Talks Comics. But so I'm really not sure if... I don't think Lagaro's costume was exactly the same. I think it was darker color because it's shown as a light brown here, or a tan almost here. And I don't remember if Sandy the Golden Boy was ever a member of Infinity Inc., but, you know, whether he was or he wasn't, you know, quite often they would make statements about things that were coming and then that never showed up. Like they keep talking about in the letters pages, they keep talking about this Justice Society miniseries that Jerry Ordway is going to draw and Roy Thomas is going to write, which I don't think ever came to pass exactly like that. I think it was supposed to be a 6-issue miniseries. Now, there was an America versus the Justice Society miniseries, but that only ran 4 issues, and Jerry Ordway only drew the covers for that series. Just like he drew the covers, he's still doing the covers for All-Star Squadron at this point. But that's all. He's not doing the interiors. So, that's it for this story. It's not my favorite. It's an interesting story, I think, because it gives you a perspective into the past. If you're interested in Dr. Fate or the Spectre, or even the Atom, the Atoms, you know, how the Atom eventually got superpowers and changed his costume. Although there's not really a lot on that, other than the fact that the Atom, you see the Atom getting sick from the radiation that he absorbed from Cyclotron in the previous story. But you get to see Wonder Woman's magic sphere. This is a much more magic-based story than I think we've had up to this point in All-Star Squadron. So for historical reasons, I think it's an interesting story. I wish I liked it more, but it is what it is. And so that's it for this two-parter in which you get Dr. Fate and battling the Spectre and battling Kulak, and the Justice Society battling the Spectre and battling Kulak, and Sargon the Sorcerer. So if you're interested in the history of that kind of stuff, then this would probably be a good story to read. Otherwise, well, it's up to you. Following up on a few things I talked about in this episode. First, Cyclotron, also known as Terry Curtis. From what I can find based on my research, he only appeared in flashbacks after the Ultra Humanite story. He had a few appearances here and there, but they look like they were probably just mentions in origin stories and things like that, or flashbacks. So the Doctor Strange villain that I was trying to think of, the one with the flaming head, that's Dormammu. And I believe it's Baron Mordo, not Mordo. Baron Mordo is the other Doctor Strange villain that I mentioned. And then finally I wanted to talk about that Infinity Inc. Splash page at the end of All-Star Squadron number 28. There's one character on there named Lagaro. Now, she was supposed to be a protege of Wildcat, or at least that's what it looked like, and that's what I thought. And I did a little research, and for what I could find, she never appeared, or at least there was no character named Lagaro. There was another character named Wildcat, sometimes called Wildcat 2, or at least in Who's Who referred to, I believe, as Wildcat 2, who was also known as, her civilian identity was Yolanda Montez, and she first appeared during Crisis on Infinite Earths. She became a member of Infinity Inc. Her first appearance in Infinity Inc., I believe, was in issue 21, and she was the goddaughter of Ted Grant, who's the original Wildcat. The other person that I mentioned was Sandy the Golden Boy. Now, he's a character who goes back to the golden age of comics. He was the sidekick of the Sandman, the original Sandman, Wesley Dodds. Not the Sandman of the Sandman comic book written by Neil Gaiman. It's a completely different character, I believe. He only had one appearance in Infinity Inc., and that was in issue 30. So he was not a member of the team. Now, I did a little research on this. I started to go down one of these rabbit holes, and I was kind of interested in this. Now, he did appear in the Golden Age. He had quite a few Golden Age appearances alongside Wesley Dodds' Sandman. Both of them, their final appearance in the Golden Age was in Adventure Comics number 102, which was dated February-March of 1946. Now, after that, they don't appear for quite a while. Now, the Sandman did show up in a few of the JLA, JSA crossovers that started happening in the 60s. And he showed up in a number of those, but it wasn't until JLA number 113, and the full title at that point was Justice League of America, not to be confused with the later series, which was just titled JLA, Justice League of America number 113, where you finally, I believe that's where it's revealed what happened to Sandy the Golden Boy. But between the Golden Age appearances, now that appearance, that was in 1974, so we'd gone from 1946 to 1974 without any appearances by Sandy the Golden Boy. So he finally shows up again in Justice League of America number 113. Then there's a story in Wonder Woman number 238. Now, this was in that period where Wonder Woman was running World War II stories, and so it was Earth 2 Wonder Woman stories. And Sandy the Golden Boy, along with Sandman, showed up in issue 238. Sandman had also appeared in Wonder Woman 231 and 232. All three of those issues were from 1977. And then finally, there are two issues of DC Comics Presents, issues 42 and 47. 42 was what happened to the Sandman, and then 47 was what happened to Sandy the Golden Boy. Now, I have issue 42. I've had it for a number of years. Those whatever happened to features were like a backup feature in DC Comics Presents. And the cover feature in that one, and the reason why I bought it was probably the cover feature, which is the Superman teaming up with the Unknown Soldier, because the Unknown Soldier was always one of my favorite wartime characters. But I never picked up issue 47. And unfortunately, I don't know if I'll ever get issue 47 at this point, because apparently that's the first appearance of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe in comic books. And so it goes for some pretty big bucks. I mean, I think the cheapest copy I could find on eBay was something like $60 or $70, and it just went up from there. And those were probably in not very good shape. So, and it's not available on Comixology. I checked there. Issue 42 isn't that expensive. I found issues for as little as $1 or less on eBay. Now that doesn't include shipping costs, but Wonder Woman 238 is a little pricey. I mean, it's not as pricey as that issue of DC Comics Presents. I think I could probably get it for $8 to $10, including shipping costs. And JLA 113 is available on Comixology, so I could get that for $2 that way. So Sandy the Golden Boy was not a member of Infinity Inc. He did make a number of appearances in Young All-Stars, a series which I've only read like 1 or 2 issues of, and it's been a long time. So I'm really not sure if he was a member of the team. It sounds like he probably was, considering he had like maybe a dozen appearances in the comic book, but I'm not sure. There was also a few reprint appearances of Sandy the Golden Boy back in like the early 70s. There's like 3 or 4 comics which reprinted appearances from the Golden Age, reprinted appearances from Adventure Comics, which is I think is where Sandman and Sandy the Golden Boy appeared primarily. So those 4 comics that I mentioned, Justice League of America 113, Wonder Woman 238, and then DC Comics Presents issues 42 and 47 were the only appearances between the Golden Age and his appearance in All-Star Squadron number 18, which was kind of a prelude to and it's actually one that I did not talk about, but it's kind of a prelude to the Ultra Humanite saga, because that's where you see the origin of the Thor's hammer, or mace, that shows up. And Fairy Tales Fenton is in that issue, and they relate that back to a previous appearance of Fairy Tales Fenton back in Adventure Comics, and they might have even reprinted a page or 2 from that. I can't recall, or maybe I've seen that reprinted somewhere. I'm not sure. That story may have been reprinted, and maybe I own the reprint of that. That might be what I'm thinking of. I'm not sure. So those were the only 4 appearances of Sandy the Golden Boy, but he was not a member of Infinity Inc., and I think because he'd been turned into a monster or something like that, and that's what was revealed in Justice League of America number 113, and then that was still the case in those DC Comics Presents appearances. Of course, that Wonder Woman issue was a Golden Age story, so that would have been back in the Golden Age. Oh yeah, and also that Wonder Woman story also features the first appearance of Kung the Assassin, who was this Japanese supervillain, I guess, who's a martial artist, I think, and can also change his form. He's a shapeshifter, I guess. And he appeared in some early issues of All-Star Squadron, like issues 8, 9, something like that, and then maybe appeared a couple times later on as well in All-Star Squadron. So that's it for my follow-up on this story. Yeah, I know I've gone on quite a bit and kind of went down a real rabbit hole there doing this. That's it for episode 84 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. On Twitter, @DaveTalksComics. Email can be sent to davetalkscomics@gmail.com. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about For the Man Who Has Everything. Both versions, the comic book version from Superman Annual number 11 and the cartoon version from Justice League Unlimited. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.